He will be known as Trancer. He really has no name, since neither he nor his people have sophisticated speech, and so cannot think of themselves or of each other in terms of words. They have, however, a deep commitment and affection for members of their own group. Cooperation is necessary in the bleak mid-latitude tundra and coniferous forests where they live. To the north lies the snows and the glaciers of the vast ice cap. To the south, beyond the narrow belt of conifers, lies the vast sweep of cold steppe. There may be more habitable places beyond the chill grasslands, but they are too far away to contemplate. The gnawing cold of winter is reaching downwards again, and the store of food that they have gathered this year is not very big. It will be difficult to feed all 20 of the group through the winter, and impossible if they are raided by others. Trancer is wary of fighting. Half the food store in the shelter was gained by stealing from the other groups of the forest. This should not be. There should be plenty of food for everybody, and if there is not, it should be shared equally. Certainly Trancer will be willing to share the mound of seed cones that he is now carrying back to the shelter. His wariness is temporarily overcome by a vague sense of achievement, as he is now carrying more cones than he has ever been able to before. He found the slouched bark of a dying tree, and he kept piling cones onto it until it could hold no more. Then he carefully lifted it from the ground, and is now carrying the find and the food back to the shelter. If he had been using a thing like this all summer, the whole group would have been able to gather much more food. He breasts the edge of the narrow gully where the shelter is built, and begins to descend the slope carefully. Between the straight trunks of the trees, the soil is loose. A yellow fragment of crust of decaying needles, leaves, and rich black soil beneath. The shelter is a tightly woven hood of sticks and branches, covered with a closey layer of soil and needles. It is built halfway up the slope that faces the sun, so that it will be warmed by the earliest rays of next season, and yet is far enough above the floor of the gully to avoid the bitter frost of the hollows. These hints of her survival have been passed on by example from one generation to another. Strong smells of crushed needles stop Trancer in his tracks. There is something wrong. He drops his load of cones and finds the shelter of an isolated bramble bush. Dimly, far along the slope, he can see a dozen figures heading silently towards the shelter. They are not his own people. It can only be a raiding party. Trancer leaps from the cover and runs down the cascading stream of soil and needles towards the shelter. He shouts to break up the raiders' stealth, causing the surprised faces of his group to appear at the entrance. Then, at the edge of his vision, he sees that the approaching party has abandoned its silence and burst out into a full-force attack. The males of his group rush out to defend the shelter, and Trancer turns to join them. Then he sees that the raiders are much more numerous than he had thought, and realizes that his little group is not going to stand much of a chance. Warily, he steps back from the front line. He is not going to fight. He has had enough. He retreats into the corner of the shelter, closes his eyes tightly, and curls himself up into a compact ball. With all his mind, he wishes that this were over, that all the fighting was done, and that the raiders had gone away. He wishes! He wishes! He opens his eyes to a dark silence. Nothing is moving anywhere, and there is the unmistakable stench of death around him. His head aches, he is cold, and as he stretches from his cramped position, he finds himself to be unbelievably stiff. What has happened? Slowly he crawls into the jagged shape of lightness that is the entrance of the shelter. Day is just dawning. He must have been asleep, in the midst of a battle? This could not have been an ordinary slumber. As the sky lightens, he is able to take in what he sees about him. The raiders have left his tribe all dead. The bodies of his family are scattered limply around. They must have ignored him, thinking him dead. So, well, he does not look at the food store. He knows that it will have gone. He cannot possibly survive the winter now. Then he looks closer at the bodies of his family. The spilled blood is dried to blackness. The faces are blue and sunken. The eyes have been taken by birds. These people have been dead for days. He's been asleep for days. How can this be? For the next few days and nights he can think of nothing else. His last recollection of the battle was of himself curling into a corner and wishing that it were all past. Now suddenly it is all past, as if he had wished himself into a temporary death to avoid danger. If he can do that to avoid permanent death in a battle, could he also do it to avoid death by cold and starvation through a harsh winter? It is worth a try. Best thing is to eat as much food as he can now. Presumably his body will still need it while he is asleep, even though it will use it more slowly. Then he will have to find a comfortable, sheltered place and wish that winter were all over. He hopes that it will be as easy as that. It is his only chance of seeing the winter through until the warm growing times return. This one will be referred to as Snatch. In shape, he is much like the generalized, dim-witted, temperate forest dwellers generated in the laboratories of now extinct engineers 3,000 years ago. He has the long body with a complex digestive system that allows him to eat almost anything, from leaves to grubs. His arms and fingers are long and nimble, but his legs are quite short. They were meant for pushing through thicket and undergrowth and for climbing the thick trunks of deciduous trees, not for striding across the wobbly peat bogs and sharp grasses of the open tundra. Nevertheless, the quickness of his actions have enabled him, and a few like him, to live on this original area, despite the fact that the landscape has changed from mixed woodland through coniferous forest to chill tundra bleakness in a few thousand years. Now an ice cap sparkles on the northern horizon, where there was once a luxuriant green of forest in the time of his great-great-great-grandfather. The standing waters of the peat bogs attract a huge flock of ducks and other birds for most of the year, and Snatch has become adept at catching these. By floating variously shaped bits of woods on the surface of a pond, he can entice the birds to land there. Then, when they are settled, he darts out of the concealing reed beds and grabs one before it can fly off. This time, though, the weather has caught him out. The water of the lake is too cold for a long-term immersion, and the birds have not been coming. The sun is going down, and the sky is about to turn the misty purple he usually sees when he is almost back amongst his tribe. But this evening, his tribe is a long, long way away. Yet still he remains, reluctant to return empty-handed. On the other side of the lake forges one of the tundra dwellers, which also seems to be separated from its group. Its compact appearance, with its furry rolls of fat and its short arms and thick legs, make it look as if it belongs in the landscape. It seems to be at home here, while Snatch, with his long limbs, does not. The two beings ignore one another. Their differing lifestyles do not put them in conflict, yet it seems to Snatch that the tundra dweller should resent him for being somewhere he does not belong. But he does not think too much about it. All he hopes for at the moment is that the other creature's movements do not interfere with his hunt. Then, with a comical quacking noise, half a dozen birds settle on the still water, breaking up the reflection of the cold, empty sky. Now Snatch squats into his hiding place amongst the fluffy heads of the grass, waiting for his chance. It is a long time before any of the birds paddle close enough for an attack, but eventually they drift over towards his side of the lake. With a single dive, he throws himself out from the bank, his long arms and delicate fingers shooting towards his prey. Startled ducks leap straight from the water, upwards in the water, flapping towards the sky in safety. One is too slow. The long fingers closed around the webbed foot, and with a flurry of feathers it is dragged back as Snatch's body splashes downwards into the chilly waters of the lake. The numbing impact of the icy water cannot subdue Snatch's yells of triumph as he leaps out of the lake with his prize. Yet before he has wrung the bird's neck, the chill has crept from his skin, through his flesh, into his bones. His newly caught meat will be of no use to him if he freezes to death. He rips the head off the bird, tears away the crop, and plunges his numb fingers into the warmth of the carcass. It is not enough. He must find more body heat somewhere. There is only one other big living thing nearby. The tundra dweller stands, still as a dead tree, watching all this with a dim curiosity. It shows no fear as Snatch approaches it carefully. Why should it? Tundra dwellers have no natural enemies out here on the tundra, and no capacity for fear was ever designed into them by the genetic engineers all those millennia ago. For Snatch, there is a problem. How does he kill a big creature like this? His hands have only dealt with small mammals and birds up to now. The face, with the tiny eyes and broad nostrils, stares at him from within the frame of its voluminous neck ruff. There is no expression, and the creature does not flinch as Snatch drops his bird and throws himself at it, groping for a soft or vulnerable spot on its broad chest or its thick neck. Everywhere his fingers find tightly matted hair and yielding blubber, nothing to hold or tear. Then, slowly, the great body leans over him and goes down onto its knees, pinning him to the springy vegetation. Snatch panics and writhes and twists to pull himself from out of under the mass of the bouncing fat, but he is trapped. He can do nothing now but wait for this great creature to kill him. After a while, Snatch realizes that he is not dead. The tundra dweller has not tried to kill him. It is just ignoring him. It went down onto the ground to reach Snatch's dropped bird, and is now eating it. Snatch was trapped by accident. Night is falling, and it is warm in the folds of furry fat. As long as the tundra dweller remains where it is, Snatch will survive, so he is quite happy to let it have its catch in return for this life-saving imprisonment. That way lies the end of the blizzard and the howling white blankness. Somewhere in that direction is the secluded dull of a gentle green woodland, full of berries and nuts, with the misty shafts of bright sunlight slanting through the leaves, bringing dappled patches of warmth, and the relaxed noises of the chattering, twittering birds over the gurgling of the little brook as it splashes over the moss-covered rocks. How does Harusha know that? She has never been there before. She has never even seen a gentle green woodland, and would not recognize berries or nuts for what they were, and would be alarmed at the strange noises of twittering birds. Yet, somehow, she knows that these things are to be found in the direction which she is walking. Her colony by the seashore is starving. The colder weather this year has meant that fewer fish have come to the beaches, and fewer herbs are growing along the blown shingle that separates the gray ocean from the white of the ice cap. Others have traveled out from the colony both ways along the coast to try to find new sources of food, but few have returned, and those who did come back, reported no success. Now Harusha and her mate Voss have tried going inland instead, a bold and dangerous choice, and one that Voss is constantly regretting. Inland is nothing but snow and ice. As they trudge onward, the blizzard develops, intensifies, and turns everything to a featureless whiteness. Their vision is blocked by the relentless glare, their hearing muffled by an unchanging howl of the wind, and their sense of touch numbed by the cold. Suddenly, with her normal senses dulled by the disorienting surge of the blizzard, Horatio remembers something that she could not possibly have experienced, and with excited gestures urges Voss to follow her. This is too much for her mate, who turns and tries to find their tracks, hoping to follow them and make his own way back to the coast. Acting on the hunch that is stronger than her mating bond, she trudges in the direction her senses dictate, deeper and deeper into the blasting, blinding blizzard, and suddenly the snow gives way beneath her. She falls, tumbling with the snowy lumps, and ends up face down in a shallow drift. As she struggles free, she finds that the wind has dropped, and she is lying on a sheltered, ice-free valley. Dark rocks jut from the black frozen soil, and an ice-bound stream winds along the valley floor. The most remarkable features of the landscape, though, are the hulks of dead trees, standing black and branchless, frozen and upright, where they died of cold an unimaginable time ago. This is the green and leafy dell that she remembers, but changed by time and creeping coldness. How can she remember this, when the trees she sees around her have obviously been dead since the time of her father's 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 father? Could that be it? Could the landscape have been seen by one of her fathers? Could the memory have been passed on to her, like her distinctive hair and eyes? As far as she knows, none of the others of the colony have had that experience before. Certainly her mate Voss has not. She settles by the frozen stream, smashes a thin covering of ice, and drinks from the cold water beneath. Surely this experience could be useful. Surely she must be able to remember other things that her ancestors saw and knew, things that would help the colony in its time of trouble. She must think, where is their food? Where the stream comes out comes the answer, in a lake full of fish, a lake that never freezes out over even in the harshest of winters. She remembers that now. Weary from her journey, but now filled with hope, Horatio rises and walks heavily down the frozen soil of the valley, following the winding stream between the dark rocky banks. Eventually the valley gives out and a plain stretches out before her. The blizzard has abated and she can now see for some distance. In the middle of the plain is a white expanse of perfectly flat snow that can only be the lake. It is frozen now, but the ice is quite thin, and it seems very likely that fish still live there. That is what the colony needs to know. She turns to retrace her journey along the coast, and there in the distance she sees a figure coming towards her. A figure she seems to recognize. It is not Voss, is it? No, Voss does not have the knowledge that brought her here. It must be someone else who can remember this place from long before they were born. Someone else who has the ability, an ability forced to the surface by the jeopardy of the colony. This figure is closer now, and she sees that it is Croft, the son of her cousin, a person she has always ignored since the two of them have never had anything in common. That must change now. If Croft has the knowledge, then he is a far more suitable mate for her than Voss ever was. This needs to be seriously considered. Plenty of fruit is available in the tropical treetops, so there's nothing to worry about here. Like the extinct monkeys and apes, the tree dweller, he has not the wit to consider himself as an individual, let alone as a being with a name. Climbs the vertical trunk through the luminous green of the leaf canopy, and scampers four-footed along a broad bough, forking onto a thinner branch, and finally along slender waving twigs to reach the point where the bunches of fruit dangle invitingly. Hanging upside down now, he reaches outwards with his narrow, prehensile fingers and delicately prizes the bunch free from its stalk. Some fruits drop off, falling with a fading plop plop through the layers of leaves and twigs below, away to the forest depths. These are immediately forgotten, as he has secured enough for his needs. This is his whole life. It is of no relevance to him that the equatorial tropical forest belt of the Earth is narrower now than it has been at any time within the last million years, that the cooler climates have been encroaching from the north and south, bringing their wingy grasslands and barren deserts with them. The only significance to him is the fact that when he is in the gloom of the lower branches, he often sees, on the forest floor, bands of strange creatures moving purposefully in a particular direction. Since he rarely ventures down onto the floor anyway, he just ignores them. The lost fruits, dented and bruised by their fall through the branches, at last thumps softly down into the decaying plant matter of the forest soil. A group of gaunt, long-legged plains dwellers, uneasy and out of place in this strange environment, but driven from their grasslands by increasing cold and ravening packs of wild creatures, starts at the sudden noise. Then, when they see that a fruit is fallen, all four of them pounce on it, scratching and tearing at one another in their attempts to reach it first. This drama is completely irrelevant to the tree dweller. There is always plenty to eat up in the sunny heights, and he can leave the lower shades to those strange beings. It is in the far north and the far south the Ice Age is causing havoc. Fluctuating ice sheets and glaciers, together with unstable weather patterns, are forcing highland middle latitude inhabitants to resort to drastic measures and changes in lifestyle in order to continue living, and encouraging genetic changes in body and mind that could not have endured if the environment had remained constant and unchanging. Here in the tropical forests, however, things have not altered for thousands of years. The tree dwellers have a constant supply of fruit and insects in their leafy canopies, so there is no need for them to move to new areas or change in any way.